What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the winners and losers of the trade deadline. The first video will be about the Eastern Conference. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. The first team up is the Philadelphia 76ers, and I'd say they're slight winners. They didn't do too much at that deadline, and I don't think they needed to. They just need to be healthy. They picked up Quentin Grimes, Jared Butler, and all they lost was Caleb Martin, who's a slightly worse version of Quentin Grimes defensively and offensively. Tyser Martin, who was solid for them, but nothing special, and Reggie Jackson, who was out of their rotation, and there was no need for him considering they have Tyrese Maxey and Kyle Lowry as the point guards. Up next is the Milwaukee Bucks, and I'm not a fan of the deadline moves at all, so I'm gonna say they're losers. They sent out Chris Middleton, who hasn't been the same since coming back from injury, but we know what he can be, and there is a chance he gets back to his best. They also sent out the first round pick in the last draft, AJ Johnson, who they clearly thought was good, or else they wouldn't have reached for him in the draft. Delon Wright is not a big loss. Their defense is still shaky, so maybe it might be a bigger loss than people think. And MarJon Beauchamp, who hasn't been good this season. And they get Kyle Kuzma, who's having a terrible season, but who isn't on the Wizards. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt until I see him on the court for the Bucks. Jericho Sims, who I don't think will play unless it's garbage time or there's an injury to Brook Lopez or Bobby Portis. And Kevin Porter Jr., who's having a surprisingly good season as a backup guard for the Clippers. I think he can be somewhat productive in the limited minutes he gets when Dame is having a rest. Up next is the Chicago Bulls, and they are massive losers. When they traded Zach LaVine to help facilitate the Aaron Fox trade, it looked like they were going full tank mode, but that was not the case. That was the only move they did. They had a chance and should have traded Nikola Vucevic when he was at his highest in value in a while, but they chose to stay put and kept him on the roster. They had 3 elite players that should have gone for a ton of assets in Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Alex Caruso, but all they got for all 3 of them combined was Josh Giddey, Kevin Huerter, Zach Collins, Trey Jones, 2 second-round picks, and their full pick back for this year's draft that probably would have gone to them anyway. Up next is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they had a pretty quiet trade deadline, but they didn't need to do too much, if anything. They chose to upgrade their wing depth, and they're absolute winners. They landed the 3-and-D wing they had been looking for a couple of years. As if they weren't already scary enough, they just got even scarier. DeAndre Hunter is the leading scorer off the bench, averaging 19 points a game. Those numbers will go down as his role diminishes in Cleveland, but the less load he has to carry, the better it'll be for him. All they had to give up was Caris LeVert, who was phenomenal to start the season, but was looking like he was the front runner for Sixth Man of the Year. But then he got injured and hasn't been the same player since. In his last 2 games for the Cavs, he shot a combined 0 from 13 from the field, 0-8 in his last game against the Pistons, and 0-5 against the Celtics. Georges Niang, who I really liked on the Cavs, but a lot of people didn't, and 3 second-round picks, including 2 pick swaps. Whether he plays like this in a new system, or even next year, is not the point. Getting a player of his caliber for that cheap is a win in my eyes. Up next is the Boston Celtics, and they aren't winners nor losers. The only moves they made was trading away Jaden Springer to Houston for second-round picks and signing Torrey Craig, who was waived by the Bulls. They're defending champs, so I'll give them a pass for not making any moves. They're also the second seed in the Eastern Conference. Up next is the Atlanta Hawks, and they are massive losers. The Hawks should be trying to win as hard as they can because the Spurs own their first-round pick this year from the DeJounte Murray trade. But the moves they made signifies they're sort of in the middle of a rebuild. But they've been in this exact position for like 4 years now. They're not good enough to contend, but they also aren't bad enough to get a top pick. During the trade deadline, they traded DeJounte Murray to the Cavs in exchange for Caris LeVert, Georges Niang, 3 second-round picks, and 2 pick swaps. It was a move that made absolutely no sense for them. They could have gotten way more from Hunter. They also traded away Bogdan Bogdanovic for Terrence Mann, Bones Highland, and 3 second-round picks. Then they later waived Bones Highland. Then they also traded away Cody Zeller for pretty much nothing. The next team up is the Miami Heat, and I'd say they're winners. Yes, they did lose Jimmy Butler, but he already had 2 feet out of the door, and getting back anything for him would be a win for the Heat. They got back Andrew Wiggins, who's having a really good season, where he's averaging 17 points, and Kyle Anderson, who's a solid player off the bench. And they also got Davion Mitchell from the Raptors. All they gave up for him was PJ Tucker, who was barely on their roster, a second-round pick, and cash. They also lost Josh Richardson from the Butler trade. Davion Mitchell is such an underrated player. His defense is so valuable, his nickname is literally Off Night, because whoever he guards will have an off night. And the fact the Raptors gave him away for pennies on the dollar blows my mind. Up next is the Charlotte Hornets, and they're gonna be slight winners. It feels like I've been very lenient, just calling everyone winners so far, but I just think what they have done is good for their organization going into the future. Going back to the Hornets, I like that they finally traded Cody Martin away and got back a first-round pick for him. Something I thought I'd never see, but the Suns were so desperate to offload Yusuf Nurkic's contract, they gave up a first-round pick for him. The Suns are not a good team right now and have an even worse future, so unless there's protections on that pick that I don't know about, which there probably is, it could be a very high pick. That wasn't the only move they made with the Suns. They also traded Nick Richards and a second-round pick to them for Josh Okogie and 3 second-rounders. That trade is also looking like quite a solid trade, as Okogie has massive defensive potential and has scored quite a bit in his few games with the Hornets. The only thing holding him back is his injury concerns. Up next is New York Knicks, and they didn't do much either, other than involving themselves in the Kyle Kuzma, Chris Middleton trade, where they sent Jericho Sims to Milwaukee for DeLon Wright and cash. They literally did nothing else. I was fine with Boston not doing anything at the deadline because they're the defending champs and proved to be as big of a threat as they were last year. But New York aren't there just yet. I thought they needed to make another move to improve their depth, whether that meant trading Mitchell Robinson and some picks to acquire more playable bodies so that the stars can rest a little bit more and not gas out in the playoffs where they have to play 40 plus minutes or even 48 if you're Josh Hart. I did like the acquisition of Delon Wright as a perimeter defender. I guess we'll have to wait and see where Mitchell Robinson comes back. The next team up is the Orlando Magic, and I'm gonna say they're losers as well. We know how good they can be when they're healthy, but they haven't been healthy all season, and at this rate, they're not cut out to win a championship for another couple of years. They have one of the best defenses in the league, but their offense has a lot to be desired for. Signing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was meant to help out their offense and three-point shooting when he signed with them in the offseason, but it's been underwhelming to say the least. I was hoping they'd go after Cam Johnson, but they decided to stay put and not make any moves. It would have been nice if they could have upgraded, but I'm not too mad at them for keeping the roster how it is. They're still a top 5 team in the East when healthy. De'Aaron Fox or a reunion with Nikola Vucevic would have been nice, but obviously it wasn't meant to be. Moving on to the Brooklyn Nets, and they're probably the biggest losers of the deadline. They had the perfect opportunity to sell Cam Johnson at his highest value, and for whatever reason, they decided to keep him on their roster. I'm not even a Nets fan, and it just pisses me off. Maybe they didn't get 2 first-round picks for him, but who in their right mind will give that much up for Cam Johnson? Don't get me wrong, Cam is good, but 2 first-rounders? Let's be realistic now. I'm sure there were offers for him that were very valuable, but not 2 first-rounders valuable. They traded away Dorian Finney-Smith for D'Angelo Russell, Maxwell Lewis, and 3 second-round picks, and they traded Dennis Schroeder for DeAnthony Melton, who's out for the season, and 3 more second-rounders. That's all they did. Bojan Bogdanovic and Nick Claxton both should have been up on the trade block. The next team up is the Indiana Pacers, and they're also losers. They were just in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and while some may say they were only there because of the injuries the Bucks and the Knicks had, they still made it regardless. They had a chance to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals if they made some moves, but for some reason, the only move they made was trading a 2031 second-round pick swap to Miami for Thomas Bryant and trading James Wiseman for a second-round pick. They had Obi Toppin, who was a good contract to trade away. Surely they could have got someone valuable for him. Up next is the Detroit Pistons, and they're slight winners. I would have liked them to be more aggressive when it comes to making moves, but they didn't really need to. They traded cash to the 76ers for KJ Martin and 2 second-round picks. Then they later traded KJ Martin and a future second-rounder to the Jazz for Dennis Schroeder, Lindy Waters, and a future Warriors second-round pick as part of the Jimmy Butler trade. I would have liked them to trade for Brandon Ingram, but it is what it is. Up next is the Toronto Raptors, and they're winners of this trade deadline. They were able to land an all-star caliber player like Brandon Ingram when healthy, and all they had to give up was Bruce Brown, who seemed to be injured all the time anyway, and Kelly Olynyk, who they didn't need, considering they have Jakob Poeltl, Chris Boucher, and Jonathan Mudbo, who are all sickness or capable of playing center. They also got PJ Tucker. As long as they don't buy him out, he'll be a good mentor for the young guys like Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Ochai Agbaji. They did get rid of Davion Mitchell, however, which I'm not a huge fan of. but they do already have Jamal Shed, who's pretty much the same player, with a little more polish on the offensive bent, and Young. So maybe I'm fine with it. I guess we'll have to wait and see. The last team up is the Washington Wizards, and they're surprisingly winners. The first move they made at the deadline was trading away Jonas Valanciunas to the Kings for City Sissoko and 2 second-round picks. They then traded Jared Butler and 4 second-round picks to the Sixers for Reggie Jackson and a first-round pick. They later made their biggest trade of the deadline by sending Kyle Kuzma to the Bucks and Patrick Baldwin Jr. to the Spurs for Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, and a 2028 pick swap. But that wasn't the last move they made. They then sent Marvin Bagley, Johnny Davis, and a second-round pick to the Grizzlies for Marcus Smart, Colby Jones, Alex Len, and a 2025 first-round pick from the Grizzlies. And what can I say? I'm a fan of what they've done. They've sent out their older players for some vets, a couple of young players, and first and second round picks. That's going to end this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and comment your winners and losers in the comment section below. Just a reminder, the West video will come out tomorrow.